Now, this is a difficult text, and we'll get into it with some of its wonderful, awful complexity. But before we do, I want to share a story. So, a couple of months ago, I was right up here, it's beginning of some of our time with one another, and I said, none of us are above reproach. If any of us are out of congruence with our values, I hope that we could be willing to have some difficult conversations with one another. And that includes me. After that service, Clay came up to me. I'm sharing this with his permission, by the way. And Clay said, I took your trash out the other day, and I saw that there were some fast food wrappers in there. Now, I know that your health matters to you, and I know that the planet matters to you, the environment matters to you. I have to tell you, if you're eating fast food like that, you're not living in congruence with your values. It's bad for the environment, and it's bad for your health, Giuseppe. Now, that was a little uncomfortable for me, but I have to say I'm grateful. I'm so grateful that Clay feels like he can talk to me about these things that are concerns for him. And is he wrong? Can I say, no, you're wrong? No, he's right. He is right. He's pointing out an inconsistency with me. Now, conversations like this, they require bravery. They're vulnerable conversations. They require vulnerability on Clay's part. All right, I'm going to put this out there. This is a confrontation of sorts, even done well, right? And what if Giuseppe doesn't receive this well? He's the new pastor. What if he's upset with me? I'm the moderator. I got to keep working with him. And they require some vulnerability on my part. I'm either going to armor up and get defensive, be like, hey, listen, it's okay. I've invested in a company that buys carbon offputs or something or other. It's actually totally fine to eat like this. It's great for the body. It's great for the earth. Whatever. That's defensiveness. And that is something I've been prone to. Or I could choose to be vulnerable and receive the words and consider them. And when we can hold brave conversations with one another, I believe there is a great potential for transformation. These can be transformative conversations. But transformation does require some sacred, brave vulnerability. And that brings us to our text today, our wonderful, kind of awful, very interesting text. Now, church, what are we going to do with this? A little bit of background. In this story, Jesus is tired. He's had some big moments in his ministry. As we've covered in a previous week, John the Baptist has been executed by now, by Herod. He's fed the 5,000. He's walked on water. And now Jesus goes to this region of Tyre, and he just wants to rest. Have you ever had that moment in your life where you've done so many good, great things? Maybe you've encountered some hard things, but you've been doing the work you're supposed to be doing, and you just want to rest. And then you get a knock at the door. That person often doesn't get the best of us. And this is the kind of starting point that we get here. Along with all of this, he's just recently confronted the Pharisees and the Sadducees for being overly concerned with the religious protocol over just outcomes in their society. So I have to say that, after I have a brave conversation with folks, after I've shown up and maybe called out power structures, I do usually feel pretty spent. I want some time by myself. You know, I want to go, I don't know, read some comics, look at some action figures. I mean, art, look at art. And then this woman shows up. She is a Gentile. Jesus is Jewish. She is Syrophoenician, which makes her ethnicity-wise shared ancestry with trade partners of the Judeans, but also fellow colonized people. And as we've seen in some of our scriptures, we know that sometimes some of these neighbors have a contentious relationship with the Judeans. And the Syrophoenicians have kind of a mixed history, a lot of good, some not so good. But for people who are taking the considerations of purity laws into account, this is one of those moments where Jesus is encountering somebody who he's been told is unclean, right? A Gentile person. And she wants something from him. Now, we have other passages before this where he's encountered Gentile people and he's worked with them. Well, this is not one of those stories. At least it doesn't start off that way. She says, my daughter is home. She's got an unclean spirit, a demon. She needs to be healed. And I know you do that. I know you can heal. And he says, it is not right for me to take the food that's supposed to go to the children and to feed it to the dogs. In case you're wondering, I don't think this was a nice thing that Jesus said. Just in case you're like, I've read some commentaries over the years that have said, well, you know, he might have meant dog in a nice way. You know, like a really lovely puppy. You know, it doesn't matter how cute the puppy is. Dogs are not supposed to have people food because those got to go to the kids. I don't think that's what Jesus is saying here. Dogs are unclean in Jewish society. He's making a comparison to her as a dog because she is a Gentile. And the children are obviously his fellow Jewish people. Now, maybe you could say, well, his mission was to go to the Jewish people first, and then it could be shared with the Gentile people afterwards. Okay, yeah, we can say that. Sure. But that doesn't undo the fact that he just called her a dog, an unclean animal. Okay. Well, some of the commentaries tell me we don't know what Jesus' face looked like when he said these things. And that is also true. We don't. Maybe he said it, you know, very slyly. He's like putting it on, you know. This is a test for her. Hey, listen. It's not okay for me to feed the food that goes to the children, to the dogs. And he's challenging a point of teaching. Okay, well, we could say that, but we have no idea what Jesus' face looks like. The writer does not care to tell us. If that mattered to the writer, I hope they would have told us. All we have are the words that are said, right? And then we have what the woman says. Perhaps, Jesus, perhaps it's not okay. Perhaps it's not okay for the dogs to get the food intended for the children. But even the dogs get to eat the scraps that fall under the table. That is heartbreaking to me. As a parent, that is heartbreaking to me. Jesus, I know you can do this. I know you can do it. And I know you're not supposed to, for whatever reason. But can you just toss us a scrap here? I just want my daughter to be well. Now, perhaps Jesus is just supposed to be modeling good behavior for us. And so when he says to her, hey, for saying that your daughter is well, maybe it is simply something we are supposed to take note of and say, okay, this is how we're supposed to receive difficult conversations. This is how we ought to be responding to, if we're Jewish Christians, the Gentile in our midst. We take the correction and we say, all right, if Jesus can accept the Syrophoenician woman and he, put her through this test, we can too. That's one possibility. Another possibility is that Jesus changed his mind. Jesus learned something. And I think these are the two choices that really we're given to consider. And whatever you choose is going to be based on your Christology. That means the Jesus ideas that you have. If Jesus must be perfect, then he is modeling. If Jesus is allowed to be imperfect, then he is learning. And I'm not going to tell you which of those you got to believe. Because I do think the biggest point for us is the most practical one. Either way, if Jesus is modeling or if Jesus is learning, what do we do with the brave conversations we are faced with? What are the expectations for us when we're being called out? I think the expectation is that we receive those vulnerable, difficult corrections. We think them over, and we allow them to transform us. That's what I think. Whether Jesus is perfect or Jesus is learning is irrelevant to me. If, when we hear corrections or stories from our neighbors, we choose to say, you know what, I'm good. I know everything I need to know already. Right? Our Christology and our theology ultimately doesn't matter if we discredit and discount and dismiss the concerns of other people instead of honestly considering them. That's what I think. And I wish that wasn't so rare today. I mean, I often feel like when we have prominent figures called out on wrongdoing, they'll respond one of two ways. They'll either go on an apology tour that often seems to be pretty insincere, Maybe we'll see them go on YouTube and they have a ukulele. 4 of you might get that. And then we're like, okay, see? They sang an apology song. It's okay. And then we learned they just kept on doing the things they were doing. Or, and this is very, very common, especially in our politics, they say, no, you're the wrong one. I'm the right one. You're stupid for having your position. You're racist if you think I'm being racist, right? So on and so forth. And I see no room for healing in that. I see no room for real community healing. I see no room for personal healing. Each one of us is imperfect. Each one of us has room to grow. And I just don't think it happens if we convince ourselves that our opinion's the only one that matters and nobody else can tell us we've done anything wrong. Now, I want to leave us in a cheerier, happier note. And I want to point out that Jesus does indeed have many wonderful interactions with Gentiles outside of this. And the church does indeed come to see that those dogs are not dogs at all. They're family. And so they are not relegated to eat the crumbs that fall to the ground. They get a seat at the table. And I think for the Mark community that comes about in the aftermath of the destruction of the temple in 70 AD and the displacement of many Jewish Christians at that time, what we see is incorporation that happens because of the transformation of people's hearts, who are willing to see, yes, the Ethiopian eunuch does get a place at the table. Cornelius and his family does get a place at the table. Women, men, eunuchs, slaves, free, barbarians and Scythians, they all get a place at the table. May it be so for us as well. And may we continue to let the concerns of other people, when expressed to us personally or communally, prick our hearts, and with the courage of God, be considered for our transformation and the transformation of our community. Amen.